Every small town has its secrets. Some secrets are forgotten, others are buried. But in one quiet Midwestern town, there is a secret that refuses to die. A house that swallows sound itself. The camera slowly fades in on a wide shot. An old Victorian house at the edge of town. Its windows are shattered, its roof collapsing. Weeds and vines crawl across its broken walls. The neighborhood around it is silent. Too silent. Not a single bird, not a single car. Locals call it the Silent House. They say if you step inside, every sound you make disappears. No whispers, no footsteps, no screams. Teenagers dare each other to go inside, but almost none of them ever last more than a few minutes. They run back out, pale-faced, shaken, unable to explain what they experienced. But some never come out at all. The camera zooms slowly toward the front door. For years, stories have spread that shadows move when you're not looking, that the walls breathe when you're inside, and that the house is always listening. But the strangest thing of all, no one has ever recorded a single sound from within. Not one. And yet, 3 college students decided to try. They wanted to prove the legend wrong. They wanted clicks, views, subscribers. Instead, what they found was something darker, something that doesn't just steal sound, it steals you.
It was just past midnight when Ethan, Mia, and Jordan pulled up to the edge of town. Their car headlights cut through the fog, illuminating the crooked outline of the Silent House. The 3 of them laughed nervously as they unpacked their gear, cameras strapped to their chests, handheld flashlights, and a tripod for their intro shot. Their YouTube channel had been struggling, and tonight's video was supposed to change everything. Mia adjusted her camera and whispered to the lens, half joking but with fear in her eyes. "If you're watching this, we actually survived." Jordan smirked and pushed the heavy gate open. It groaned like an animal in pain. The air grew colder as they stepped onto the overgrown path. Every crunch of gravel beneath their shoes seemed too loud, too final. The house loomed above them, its shattered windows staring down like hollow eyes. Ivy and black vines crawled up the walls. Even the moonlight seemed afraid to touch it. They stood at the front door and Ethan, trying to act brave, grabbed the rusted handle.
"Okay, guys," he said, voice shaking with fake confidence. "We go in, we film, we prove it's all fake. Easy." The door resisted for a second, then swung open with a screech that echoed into the darkness. They exchanged nervous glances, then crossed the threshold together. And then, everything changed. The door slammed shut behind them with a force that rattled the walls. The sound should have been deafening, but it wasn't. In fact, it wasn't anything. Their laughter cut off mid-breath. Ethan's voice, halfway through a nervous joke, simply vanished. Mia gasped, but her gasp made no sound. Jordan tried to shout, but his scream was swallowed before it ever left his throat. They froze, wide-eyed, their flashlights trembling in their hands. Mia tapped on her microphone. Nothing. She banged her flashlight against the wall. Silence. Ethan opened his mouth wide, forcing out a yell that shook his chest, but the world around him remained utterly still. Jordan, panicked, pointed at his camera. The little red light was still blinking, recording everything. But when they checked the audio bar on the screen, it was flat. Dead. The silence wasn't just around them. It was inside the house, and now it had them.
The silence pressed down on them like a weight. Every step they took felt wrong, like the house itself was swallowing the sound of their shoes before it could escape. Mia typed frantically on her phone and held the screen up. It's not just quiet, it's unnatural. Ethan nodded, his flashlight beam shaking as he swept it across the hallway. The wallpaper peeled in strips, revealing damp, rotten wood beneath. Old portraits hung crooked on the walls, faces blurred with age, their eyes scratched out, as if someone didn't want them to be seen. Jordan raised his camera and filmed a slow pan of the corridor. When he looked back at the screen, his breath caught. The lens showed something his eyes hadn't. A shadow at the far end of the hallway, tall, motionless, watching. He whipped the camera up. Nothing there. He swallowed hard and motioned to the others, showing them the playback. On the tiny screen, the figure was still visible, a stretched silhouette with no features, standing perfectly still. Mia's hands trembled as she signed something to Ethan. "We need to leave, now." But Ethan shook his head. He pointed to the camera. They needed this footage. They needed proof.
They took a cautious step forward. The air grew colder, their breaths now visible, even though it wasn't winter. Their flashlights flickered, one by one, like something was draining the batteries. Then Mia froze. Her light caught the figure again, not at the end of the hallway this time. Closer. Much closer. The shadow didn't move. It didn't sway. It just stood there, impossibly still, as though the house had carved it into reality. Jordan lifted his flashlight with trembling hands. The beam landed directly on the spot, and the shadow was gone. But the moment he lowered it, the figure appeared again, closer than before. Mia clutched Ethan's arm, her nails digging into his skin. Ethan raised his camera to capture it, but through his lens, the hallway was empty again. The three of them looked at each other, terror rising in their eyes. For the first time, they all understood the same truth without speaking. The house wasn't silent. It was listening. Panic surged through their bodies. Jordan grabbed Ethan's arm, his eyes wild, pointing back toward the front door. Without hesitation, they bolted down the hallway, flashlights bouncing violently against the walls. The door loomed ahead. Finally, a way out. Ethan slammed into it with his shoulder. The wood cracked, the hinges squealed, the door burst open. But instead of the night air, the street, the safety of the outside world, they were staring into the exact same hallway they had just run through. The same peeling wallpaper, the same crooked portraits with scratched out eyes, even the faint red glow from the camera light blinking on Jordan's chest. Mia stumbled back, shaking her head furiously. She mouthed words they couldn't hear. No, no, no. Jordan, desperate, pushed past Ethan and flung the door wide open again. He shoved his flashlight into the frame. But the light beam stretched into the identical corridor, like the house was folding in on itself, trapping them in an endless loop.
Ethan tried a window. He swung his flashlight at it, smashing the glass into shards. He leaned out, but outside wasn't the street. It was pitch black, not night, not sky, just nothing. A void that felt alive, pulling at him, sucking the warmth from his skin. He yanked himself back, slamming the window shut, his chest heaving. Then it happened. Jordan turned to say something, his lips moving furiously, his hands gesturing wildly, when his flashlight flickered and died. Darkness swallowed him. Mia and Ethan swung their beams toward him just in time to see it. Something black, liquid,
yet solid, slithered across the wall behind him. It stretched upward, forming a hand, fingers too long, too thin. Before Jordan could react, the shadow hand latched onto his arm. His eyes widened, and he let out a scream that rattled his whole body. But still, no sound escaped. The wall itself rippled like water as the shadow dragged him backward. His free hand clawed at the air, his nails scraping the wooden floor, leaving deep gouges. His camera clattered to the ground, recording the horror. Mia lunged forward, grabbing his other arm, her knuckles white with effort. Ethan joined, pulling with all his strength. For a second, it seemed like they might win. Jordan's face twisted with desperate hope. And then, the shadow surged, stronger, hungrier. Jordan's body was ripped from their grip. He disappeared into the wall with a violent snap, gone as if he had never existed. The wood sealed itself behind him, smooth and silent. The only thing left was his flashlight rolling across the floor, and his camera, its red light still blinking. Mia collapsed to her knees, shaking violently, her face buried in her hands. Ethan stood frozen, his flashlight trembling in his grip, staring at the spot where his friend had just been. The silence grew heavier. It wasn't just a lack of sound anymore. It felt like the house was feeding.
Ethan and Mia stood frozen in the darkened corridor, their chests heaving in silent sobs. Jordan was gone, swallowed, erased. The house hadn't just taken him, it had devoured him. Mia clutched Ethan's sleeve with trembling hands, her nails digging into his arm. Her flashlight beam shook wildly as she pointed down the hallway. The corridor wasn't the same anymore. It stretched longer than it had before, impossibly long, as though the house was growing while they stood inside it. Doors appeared on both sides, doors that hadn't been there seconds ago. Ethan, trying to steady himself, grabbed Mia's phone and typed with frantic fingers. "Stay close. Don't stop moving." They crept forward. The silence was suffocating, thick like a blanket pressing against their ears. The only thing they could hear was their own heartbeats pounding inside their heads, like drumbeats of panic. Mia paused at one of the new doors. Its paint was peeling, wood rotting, but something about it pulled her closer. Against her better judgment, she pushed it open.
Inside was a bedroom, frozen in time. A child's room. Dust-covered toys lay scattered across the floor. A rocking horse sat in the corner, its paint chipped, its glass eyes cracked. A crib leaned against the far wall, the sheets stained yellow with age. And then, the rocking horse moved. Once. Twice. Slow, deliberate creaks, though no wind touched it. Mia's flashlight flickered. For the briefest second, she saw someone, a small figure, sitting on the horse. When the beam steadied, it was gone. She stumbled back, slamming the door shut. Her breaths came fast, her chest rising and falling. Ethan pulled her down the hall, forcing her to keep moving. But every step only took them deeper. The staircase ahead twisted downward, spiraling into darkness that seemed endless. As they descended, the walls narrowed. The wallpaper peeled away in sheets, revealing pulsating wood beneath, as though the house itself was alive, its veins running beneath the surface. Halfway down, Mia froze again. She touched her throat, her eyes wide. She mouthed a single word. "I heard."
Ethan frowned, confused. Then he felt it too. A faint vibration in his chest. Not a sound exactly, but close.
a whisper trying to claw its way through the silence. The deeper they went, the stronger it became. Not words, but something like breathing, slow, heavy, and it wasn't theirs. Mia's flashlight caught the bottom of the staircase. The shadow was there again, taller now, more solid. Its head tilted slightly, as if it had been waiting for them. Ethan and Mia froze. Their lights flickered violently, then both cut out, plunging them into absolute darkness. For the first time since they entered, a sound finally broke through. Not loud, not human. A deep, guttural hiss that rattled the walls. The house was no longer silent.
The staircase ended in a narrow corridor. The walls pressed closer, like the house was forcing Ethan and Mia into a single path. No options, no escape. At the far end, a faint light flickered. Not warm, not welcoming, but different from the crushing dark. It was a broken window. Through its jagged glass, they could see the outside world at last. The glow of street lamps, the faint outline of trees swaying in the wind. Freedom. Mia bolted forward, her face lit with desperate hope. Ethan followed close behind, clutching her arm as if letting go would doom them both. They reached the window. Mia's flashlight flickered weakly, illuminating the broken shards of glass. Without hesitation, he helped her climb up. His hands lifted her trembling frame, guiding her through the jagged frame. Mia squeezed her eyes shut and pushed herself through. For a terrifying second, the glass caught her jacket, tearing the fabric. But then she tumbled out onto the cold ground outside. She gasped. The air. She could hear it. The rustle of leaves, the distant hum of power lines. For the first time in what felt like hours, there was sound.
Tears streamed down her face. She turned back toward the window. "Ethan, come on," she cried. But her voice didn't carry inside. He couldn't hear her. Ethan climbed onto the ledge, ready to follow her. His legs straddled the window frame when the shadows surged. They burst from the walls like ink spilled in water, tendrils coiling around his arms and waist. Ethan's eyes widened as he fought back, his flashlight swinging wildly before the beams sputtered and died. Mia screamed his name, her voice cracking. She reached for him through the shattered window, but her hand fell short. Ethan mouthed words she couldn't hear. His lips trembled as he looked at her one last time. Then, slowly, he shook his head. The shadows yanked him backward into the darkness. His body twisted, his fingernails clawing grooves into the wooden frame. His camera fell from his chest harness, crashing onto the dirt outside, red lights still blinking.
Mia's sobs grew louder, her voice breaking the silence only outside the house. Inside, Ethan was gone. The window slammed shut with a violent force, rattling the ground where Mia sat. The glass was suddenly whole again, as if no one had ever touched it. Mia clutched the fallen camera to her chest, rocking back and forth in the dirt, her mind shattered. She could hear the trees, the wind, the sound of her own sobs. But Ethan's silence was louder than all of it.
Mia stumbled through the night, clutching Ethan's camera like a lifeline. Her clothes were torn, her hands bleeding, her eyes vacant with shock. She didn't stop walking until the silent house was a faint shadow behind her. Hours later, a police cruiser found her wandering along the highway. She couldn't explain how she got there. She couldn't explain what happened inside. Her words tumbled out in frantic gasps, but none of it made sense to them. At the station, detectives demanded answers. She only pointed to the camera. The footage was reviewed in silence. 3 students entering the silent house. Nervous laughter. The front door slamming shut. And then, nothing. For the next 40 minutes, the video was completely soundless. No voices, no footsteps, no background noise at all.
Just silence and the faint jerking movements of terrified kids.
The detectives leaned closer, brows furrowed. Their skepticism grew. A prank, a hoax, viral marketing. That's what they told themselves. But then, in the final seconds of the recording, just before the lens hit the dirt outside, a sound broke through. A voice, deep, distorted, not human. Not yours, now mine. The room fell into silence. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, pretending they hadn't heard what they heard. The report was closed the next day. Case dismissed, hoax, no evidence of crime. Mia was released, her warnings ignored. She never spoke about that night again. But locals swear that sometimes, when the wind dies and the night grows still, you can hear something faint if you walk near the silent house. Not footsteps, not laughter, not even screams. Just silence. A silence so heavy it feels like it's waiting. The screen fades to black. A final title card appears in blood-red letters. Would you dare to step inside?